Today we're going to be making cyanotypes, and cyanotypes are a wonderful photographic process that was developed in 1843 by John Herschel, but it's been used by photographers ever since to make photographic images. And today we're going to make some cyanotypes using negatives. This is an example of a cyanotype using a negative. You can also use objects to make the cyanotypes. We have some beautiful antique laces that we're going to use, and you can see the example of what happens when it's exposed to the sun. Generally, you make cyanotypes in a dark room. If you're using the pre-coated paper, you can just be in a normal room with low light before you put it out in the sun for exposure. When you're thinking about objects to select for cyanotypes, think about things that'll have a beautiful pattern. Most of these laces would easily fit in this contact printing frame. So first I put my paper down, then I put my lace on top of the coated paper. I put the glass on top of that, and it will make a good contact with the paper. I'm then ready to put it out in the sun and expose it. If I'm using three-dimensional objects, of course they won't fit under the glass, so I would simply put the coated cyanotype paper in the contact printing frame and put the sculptural or three-dimensional pieces on top, and then I can expose it to the sun. Be careful when you're transporting it not to move them. All right, this part of the cyanotype process needs to be done in a dark room. You can have a safe light on, which is this red light here, and I'm simply going to mix equal parts of solution A and solution B together. Right now you can buy the solutions in most art supply stores or order them online. I'm just going to pour and put equal amounts of the solution into the cup. This is a photosensitive solution, so you do need to do it in the dark room and let the paper dry in the dark room, and then you can take it out into the sun to do your exposures. So at this point, my two solutions are mixed together to make my cyanotype solution, which is again iron salts. I'm going to pour it into a little dish, and then I'm going to use a hake brush, which is a Japanese brush that's very even, and I'm going to coat paper with the brush. I'm going to make 3 separate coatings on the paper and then hang it up to dry. When coating paper, I generally like to use the smooth side of the sheet, and I want to be very gentle with it. I don't want to put too much solution on it because that'll pool and puddle and I won't get a good impression. So what I'm doing is dipping my brush into the dish and then letting it drain a little bit. Then I'm basically just floating it on top of the paper and putting nice even strokes across it. Then I'm going to go back and just get a little more solution, and I'm going to go the opposite direction. And then as a final coating, I'm not going to get any more solution, but I'm just going to make sure it's on the paper nice and smooth. At this point, the paper is completely coated with cyanotype solution and simply needs to dry before we make our exposure. So I finished coating the paper, and now I'm going to just take it over and clip it on a clothesline to dry. It normally takes about an hour for the paper to dry completely. You can speed up the process by using a small fan. I'm placing my coated paper with objects on top in the sunlight. A normal exposure time would be about 5 minutes, but I am using a negative, so I'm going to let that sit out a little bit longer. I'm also using my phone with its stopwatch option, and I'm going to time it for 5 minutes. So if you don't have the sun shining one day, if it's a rainy day or overcast, you can use a UV table. This was built by someone who was running cyanotype workshops. You can see the light. This tends to not be as powerful, so if you do this, you'll have to increase your timing under the UV lights. If you use the sun, generally it takes about 5 minutes to get a good dark exposure like this. These were the same images done with the UV for the same time, and you can see that they're much lighter. You can see the way the print looks right now. It will be the opposite when I put it in the water. This first tray is a washing tray, and I'm washing to clear the leftover cyanotype solution that has not been exposed. The water is turning a little yellow, and that's just simply the unused cyanotype solution that was covered with the lace collar rinsing out of the paper. I just want to make sure I get most of the solution out before I put it in the next tray. The peroxide really brings up the blue. And then this final wash is just about a 10-minute wash to make sure all the chemistry is out of the print. This is a photographic negative, so I normally expose this a little bit longer in the sun. This exposure has been about 9 minutes. You can see it's a good impression, but it will get much darker once I put it in the peroxide bath. See, it's quite a bit darker there. I'm simply going to let it sit in that bath for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to move it to the wash tank. It needs to wash for about 10 minutes. Once these prints are dry, you can treat them with a variety of other solutions. If you want to change the color, you can bleach them a bit. Then you can treat them with black coffee, with tea, or with vinegar. And all of those things will give you a different result. You can also paint on them with watercolors or watercolor pencils. The paper I'm using is a very good quality paper. That's either watercolor paper, which is 100% rag, or a kozo Japanese paper, which has a very fine surface and doesn't have a lot of chemicals or additives in it. If you use a paper that has chemicals or additives, it will react with the cyanotype solution. You have to be careful not to overwash your paper as well, because sometimes the image will wash off and lighten slightly. I'm just putting it down on blotter paper to let it dry. This lace collar was done on watercolor paper, and it's a little bit heavier than the kozo. Cyanotypes are a wonderful process. You can also use them to make more elaborate artworks. These cyanotype images were done specifically for this three-dimensional framing device I found. As a finishing up, after I glued them into the frame, I finished them up with cold wax to protect them, the surface. So they're not glass, but they have cold wax on them. This book gives you a lot of good information on cyanotypes. It basically talks about exposure times, the kind of setup you need, what kind of papers you might want to explore, and also toning, which is something I haven't tried myself but looks very interesting. You can use things as simple as coffee, tea, or vinegar, and you can change the tones of the cyanotypes that you make. Thanks for exploring cyanotypes with us today. I think it appeals to many different types of people. Small children, high school kids, and also adults seem to really like it. You can use it in a variety of ways.